Good evening. Welcome to another edition of Reasonable Doubt, brought to you by the Harris County Criminal Lawyers Association here at Houston Media Source. I'm your host for the evening, Justin Harris. It's been a little while since we've been on the show, and we appreciate everybody tuning in tonight. We're trying to get back into a regular pattern. We're still here in the new studio for Houston Media Source, working out some things, so bear with us if there's any technical difficulties through this. But we have an exciting, great show for you tonight. I've been working for a little while to try to get Judge Genesis Draper from Harris County Criminal Court of Law number 12 on, and she's with us tonight.
Hi.
Thank you
for having me.
Thank you for being with us, Judge. I didn't realize that railing was going to be right behind you. Sorry about that. So yeah, it's been a little while. We were talking right before the show started. It's been a little while since you were on. How have things been going in Court 12 since the last few years since we had you on?
I was about to say, it's been a few years. Mm-hmm. Things are going well. I mean, busy. Mm-hmm. And I imagine things in Court 12 are a lot different than even the last time I was here. Because it's been 6 years at this point since I took the bench.
Y'all have rolled out a couple different scheduling orders over the last couple years. How's it been? Because the last time you were on, it was more recent to when you started the bench. It wasn't like right after. I think you've been on a few times.
Yeah, I've been on a couple times.
And I think the last time you came on, we were talking a lot about the MAC.
Yes.
But how's it been? Like now you're a senior judge?
It feels like it these days, yeah.
Are you still presiding right now? Or you handed that off?
I have handed that off.
Okay.
And actually I took some time off. Now I'm the co-presiding.
Co-presiding?
Yes.
Okay. What have you seen? What is Judge Draper 2025 is different from Judge Draper 2019?
Oh man, I would say a lot. I don't know that I knew what to expect when I took the bench in 2019. Because I wasn't one of those people who was like planning to ever be a judge. So it's not like I was wondering what's behind the curtain. Mm-hmm. And so everything was new when I became a judge. And so really, I mean, Judge Draper from 2019 to 2025 has seen, the pandemic. It's seen weather events. It's seen courtroom brawls. I mean, so you learn a lot about courtroom management, administrative tasks, that keep things rolling. And it's been a crash course in administration. Different
kind of administration than when you're an attorney and running an office or working in an office.
Yeah, because I wasn't in private practice.
Right.
So I was a line defender the entire 13 years. And so I hadn't had to really worry about the budget or, if there's a weather event, let me know if we're closed.
Right.
And so having
Instead of being the one that decides.
Right, to be on those calls, to be watching, weather and speaking with people, that kind of stuff is very different. And so you just learned a lot and really kind of see how the sausage is made, if that makes sense.
Just a little sausage making side thing. So if you decide you're going to close your court for a day because of weather, do you just email Ms. James and say we're closed, or the bailiff say lock the doors, or do you have to notify someone higher up that one of the county offices will be closed?
Yeah, so we generally try to do that as a group decision.
All of the judges?
Yeah, we really don't like to say, okay, I'm closed because of weather, but the other 15 aren't. That's confusing, I think, to lawyers, and so we try to make a group decision. And so when there is a weather event, we're on the call with, county administration and our court administration, and really trying to figure out kind of what the best thing is, and then get it out there to you all as quickly as possible so that people know.
Yeah, okay.
But we really, we're like the bank. We really can't be closed.
Right.
I think this last weather event where we were looking at more than 2 days, I was like, okay, we can't do that.
Exactly.
Everybody just ice skate to the courthouse because it really feels like you can't be closed that long.
No, we can't. There's arrests constantly happening, arraignments are 24 hours a day, and so it doesn't stop for the weather, right?
Never, right. PC court is always running, it's never closed.
Right.
So if all of us are shut down, they're still going. So then you start thinking, okay, so people are in jail, and the second day has gone by, and the third day has gone by.
Do you ever go, maybe you can't answer this, but do you ever go look at which magistrate got stuck on snow duty and you're like, I got to get back to court quickly? Or never mind, I asked that question. You don't have to answer.
But the true answer is I just don't. I have too much going on.
Gotcha.
When something like that is happening. And we have faith that all of our magistrates are doing what we would like for them to be doing.
Is it, because like you said, 13 years line trial lawyer, right? Defense lawyer.
Right.
Were you ever in a prosecutor's office?
No.
You weren't, right? So you're what we'd call like a true believer, right? On the defense side?
Some would say that.
Okay. Do you struggle at all with the decisions that you have to make as a judge and remembering back in being a different role? Is that, I don't know. I don't know that it should be. I don't know what that would be like.
Yeah, I mean, I think I struggle a little bit less now because I have had a chance to settle into the role.
Mm-hmm.
But honestly, I don't think there's anything like being a defender that makes you, super conscious of every single decision that you make, how it affects everyone involved, and really like being really thoughtful about if you're doing the right thing.
Okay.
So when I'm sitting up there like, I'm really like, okay, think quickly, but you really do think a lot about it. And sometimes I do think, what would I be thinking if I was, on the other side? And just to make sure that because one of the things I tell people, particularly when there's a complaining witness, I don't have to really struggle to like sympathize with the person that has been harmed because I was born like that. We hopefully most of us were.
Right.
And so I was born thinking about how to consciously sympathize with or feel for the person that's been harmed. What's more difficult or can be more difficult is to really be thoughtful about the person being accused. And I think my job prior to this made me a little bit more acutely aware of that. And so I just always want to make sure, okay, that I'm not losing, that where I really am as mindful about the accused as I am, the person that has been harmed.
Have there been any cases over the last 6 years or just a few years that you kind of keep going back to in your mind that, I don't know, like?
One, and it's always been like this, even when I was an attorney, my memory is terrible. So when lawyers come in there like, so we talked about yesterday, I'm like, I have no idea what you're talking about. In fact, I don't know that I've ever seen you before in my life. But yeah, so there are things that I think about. I don't know that it's like necessarily case specific, right?
Okay.
I usually can remember a type of case.
Right.
Or something like that occurred, or something that I learned during the course of a trial, or something that I learned that went wrong. I'm like, okay, I won't forget that.
Do you remember being a defense attorney and feeling like a judge was making a decision, like say on like bond amount or bond conditions that was maybe motivated by outside pressure?
I really don't remember feeling like that. And maybe I'm just naive or had a different perspective then. I felt like those decisions were more mechanical back then, and so I knew what to expect.
Okay.
And it didn't feel like there was as much room for advocacy. But I didn't feel like, I wonder if they're wondering if the media is going to hear this. Because it feels like to me that the intense focus on judges and the decisions that they make and posting their pictures, I think that feels relatively new. I don't remember that as a defense attorney.
Let's talk about that a little bit. So there was a press conference not too far away yesterday, Governor Abbott had, where he's pushing this new Senate bill that's actually, it's not a Senate bill, it's a constitutional amendment. Right? He wants to change the Texas Constitution to make it more difficult to give certain categories of cases bond, right?
Right.
HCCLA also had a press conference around, like right before that, where we laid out some statistics and showed that the law is not necessary at all. It's going to be way overburdensome. Let's talk about that some. Do you feel differently now than you did maybe a couple years ago? Because I agree. I don't even think a couple years ago there was this like personal vitriol towards judges, and like all of a sudden it's like judges are responsible for the harm that somebody else causes out in the community. And it's funny that a lot of that shouting and yelling is coming from the people who are always supposed to be about personal accountability, right? Have you felt any of that pressure? Like, have you been at home and worried about things?
I will say this. I don't feel the pressure when I'm making the decision, not in that way.
Right.
Because Yeah, because I'm definitely like hyper sensitive about that. But I'll give an example. I mean, I certainly have. I used to be an avid news watcher, less so now. So I would wake up in the morning as I'm getting ready. I would play, the news in the background. I don't do that anymore.
Okay.
But when I hear a story, right, they say, oh, such and such happened, then I'm immediately like, wait, what court is that in?
Yeah, right.
What is this? What are you talking about? To try to see if there's something that we need to be aware of, or something that we can expect to be a media sensation. So
Okay.
that much has certainly changed.
Are you not watching as much media because of the position you're in, or just the way the world's gone?
Yeah.
Okay.
It's the way, it's the direction we've
nothing-
taken. I'm just like, you know what, I'm good.
Yeah.
Let me
Don't need to
chill
see
on the
that.
news.
Okay.
Let me start reading a book or something.
I'm the same way. I talked to you a little bit about beforehand. Well, I want to spend some time talking about the Mac again, but I don't want this to. I want to talk about you, and I don't want this to be like a Mac show. We can do another Mac show.
It's
right?
your show.
Well, no, this is your. I wanted you to come on and let's talk about you.
Okay.
But I do want to talk about your scheduling order. Mm-hmm. Your court is like a lot of the courts. You've adopted a scheduling order that lays out specific times and dates on a not specific dates, but time frames where you expect the parties to do certain things, and that comes with court dates, with appearances waived in some cases and required in other cases. You have 2 tracks too, don't you still?
I still do.
Okay.
It's significantly reduced these days. Not that much of a difference between the two, but I still have 2 tracks.
Okay. There is some frustration that I've heard from some other defense attorneys about I have not heard anything specific about Court 12, but courts that have the scheduling orders where there's like when a case is 90 days old or 100 days old, you have to approach on every single reset. From your perspective, why are you having attorneys do that? Why do we have to go up on every case?
So it really kind of depends. It's a lot of different reasons. Sometimes I'm just like getting a beat on where are we with this case? Is discovery even coming in? Mm-hmm. Right, and then usually, so if it's fairly early on in the case, we're only, in Harris County, early on is 60 days, right?
Okay.
And so you come to that first setting, and I'm like, okay, is discovery even coming in? And sometimes they say, yeah, discovery's starting to come in. Sometimes they're like, nah, I haven't gotten anything. We don't even have an OR. Then that's when I need to say, what's going on? We don't even have an OR. Like, what's the deal?
Right.
So that we can try to not get to the pretrial motion, then trying to figure out, okay, where's the evidence?
Office report?
Right. And so I'm trying to make it quick, but I am going to ask things like, hey, where are we with discovery? Is any discovery coming in? Has any offer been made? Something like that. Once you say that, you're getting your next date. Now, if it's a pretrial motion, there are some things expected. One is your client here. That one lets me know, do we really have eyes on this person? We still know where this person is. And then the second question is to the state. Do we have all the evidence? Today's the deadline. This is the discovery deadline. So do you have all the discovery in? If not, what's missing? Why is it missing? Do we need to have a hearing on that? And then pretrial conferences after that. What are we doing? Everybody let me know, what are we doing? Are we pleading guilty? Are we expecting a PTI? Are we having a trial? Any one of those is fine, but I need to know.
Okay.
And so for me, it's about docket management. I'm not bringing you in. At this point, we have non-trial motion, pretrial conference. That's it, before you have a trial. 2 of those, the accused person is not required to be there. They're not prohibited, but they're not required to be there. And I feel like that's a reasonable amount of time. I know it gets cumbersome to like have to wait in a line. My docket is late, so it's even more cumbersome. I do get that. But I also offer a lot of conveniences. I recognize that the lawyers practice all over, Texas, and so I allow you to zoom in. You don't have to stand in this line. You could be zooming in, quite frankly, from your couch to just give me whatever that update is. So I try to be accommodating in that way. But I don't know that people realize that the cases in Court 12, for example, got up to as high as 2,100 cases in that one court while, that was at the height of the pandemic. And so now we're, now sliding back down and we're hovering around 1,100. That doesn't happen by accident. And so docket, what I have learned, if you talk about how I'm different from when I first started, docket management is critical to make sure that these cases get heard in a timely fashion and that people get the trial that they are supposed to have.
I will agree that one thing that I do like about Court 12 is that I don't get emails and text messages like, where are you? You need to be here. Like, you do recognize that we are all around that courthouse.
Yeah, because I mean, essentially, you all know my docket's at 11, so pretty much, but if you come in between 11 and 1, you should be able to like catch docket. But like, you know, for example, today I had a meeting at 1 and then our full judges meeting at 2. So I'm looking at you crazy if you're walking in at 1:15.
Right.
Okay, what's going on?
Right.
Well, I have to go.
Right.
But if you come in, docket starts at 11, and if I think about the first day I took the bench, I called the docket like people's names,
Right.
like out loud,
Yeah.
and went through the entire docket. It feels like unthinkable now, but back then, that's...
Judge, there are courts right now still they've gone back to
Okay,
that.
well, maybe I shouldn't think that it's
We're going to get to that in a
unthinkable,
second.
But it feels an impossible task. And I now realize it wasn't necessary. But I didn't know that when I took the bench. It was like, you have to call house well, you know if people are here.
Right.
And it's like, I'm gonna know if you're here because by the time I'm done, if it's not filled out, then you never showed up.
Right.
So
The only way I'll know you're here is if I call your name.
Right. And so you live and you learn. And so this is the process that I've come up with that seems to work really well to make sure that people have a reasonable way to get here, be here, to appear, for me to reasonably keep up with my docket. Now, I don't know, if you came back 3 years from now, maybe my process is different. I don't know.
Sure.
But it has evolved to kind of meet the needs of the court.
Well, and that's evolution, or allowing it to evolve. That's something that you see so often in courts. I don't know if you remember this. You don't see it because you're only in that one court, but where they have a procedure that doesn't seem to make sense, but they just keep doing it that way over and over. So whatever people feel about scheduling orders, current state of those policies, your court is one that is open to change and doing things in a different way to be better.
Yeah, because I will say, like within that first couple of months of taking the bench, a lawyer who I've known for years and consider a friend and a trusted, friend, they were like, "Why do you call the docket?" I'm like, "What? Well, of course, what else could I do?"
That's what you're
And at the
supposed to
time,
do.
I kept doing it, but then over time, I'm like, "Yeah, why do we do that?"
Right.
And so we landed where we are now. So I mean, and I tell people all the time, I can't hear like the complaints all out in the streets.
Right.
Where am I going to hear that? So if there's like a legitimate complaint, come see me. We talked about the chairs. We're getting new furniture. It's like coming around on every floor. Yeah. They're already starting.
Did you do that?
No,
Did
I
you
will
do
say
it?
I did not
Come
do that.
on.
But we have been in conversations about new furniture, and when they announced that we were getting, I was like, "Oh, Justin's going to be so happy."
That's amazing.
It
Yeah, because
is.
I did. I went to you like, a year and a half ago, and I was like, "Judge, remember when you were an attorney and you were out there in those witness rooms and you were sitting in those chairs and you sit down and they fall over all of a sudden?" That was like, 5 years ago. The chairs are the exact same chairs, just 5 more years on. Like, can you help us out? And
Yeah, and
you
I
looked at me
said-
and you were like, "Do you know what I have to do?" Like, "I'll do my best, Justin."
And you just mentioned like, yeah, people are like really not feeling those chairs, and it kind of falls on deaf ears. But then, lo and behold, our court administration staff, it didn't fall on deaf ears.
Good.
They're like,
Okay.
"Hey, we're getting new furniture." I'm like, "Oh, wait, what?"
Some of those rooms, it's so funny. You go into some of them and there's like one chair, and then you go in the one across the hall and there's like 15, and you're like, "What is going on in here?" And I guess it must be some of those. It's in the district courts a lot of times. Maybe they're like a capital murder trial, and they'll put a witness in one room and then all the media in the other room. or something.
So it gets a little
But
lopsided.
no one
but-
goes and puts them back.
So look out for that. In the
I
next 6 months,
will.
now don't expect all new furniture in the whole courthouse.
Oh,
But
that'd
there
be
will
too
be
much.
some changes.
Okay.
That I think some areas will be more comfortable and fresher.
Okay. Let's talk a little bit about the MAC, if we
Yeah.
can. Any status that you can share with like where things are in district court MAC?
No, not really. What I can share about district court, I don't speak for district court, but I
No.
certainly have district court friends that I do think, are hypersensitive about ways to improve the way in which they run their process. But district court is a lot different from misdemeanor court, and they have a lot of like different concerns and concerns. They need a lot of experience, and so their thought process I think has been a little bit different than ours. But I can say that they're very thoughtful about it, and there are a lot of them having conversations and really spending a lot of time and brain power on trying to come up with something that improves the process that they have now.
So, felony Mac isn't dead?
Well, I don't.
We're hearing on our side, it's just.
Yeah, I was about to say
non-starter.
I can't answer that for them.
Sure.
What I can say is that I think I wouldn't be surprised if they come up with something. It might not be a Mac, but it might be something that improves the process, whether or not that's the oversight process or the, random selection process. I don't know, but I think they're actively working on something.
Is the local legal mechanism that's set up that creates the MAC and gives its authority, does that allow any of the 16 courts to individually opt out?
So that's a kind of a loaded question. I mean, I would say no, right? Because we have like local rules and we all abide by them, but we are all kind of independently elected. So
right.
Just like in any other situation, I think maybe we saw that back in the infancy of the public defender's office where some courts used it and some didn't. Courts can opt out. What is the recourse, right? There's nothing legally mandating that a court legally as in like something from the state of Texas. And so it does have to be judges willing to abide by local rules.
But can the commissioners, county commissioners, can they set up an appointment system in a way where the courts have to use it?
I haven't really contemplated, I don't think so. I mean, we're an independent group, right?
Right.
And so the work has to get done. So if a judge said, if, for example, if like we all said, okay, yeah, we're not using the MAC anymore. I mean, what would they be able to do about it, right? Like we would do it a different way. Now there's the funding source, right? They are still the funding source.
Well, right, the funding source, but then also like, if you opt out, what do you have to do? You'll have to just like find your own attorneys, your own contract attorneys assigned for your court, and you'll do it kind of like Mike McSpadden used to do it, and they're just always planted in your court, because otherwise, what is the mechanism for your court to then attach an attorney to the case and the county be able to pay that attorney?
Yeah, so that's why I don't think it would be just super easy for you to be like, yeah, I'm not doing that. Because you would have to figure out, okay, are you going to be like doing the VIPs voucher process? Where are you going to be getting the lawyers from? But at the end of the day, if a judge was really committed to going solo, they probably
could do it?
Yeah.
And the commissioners couldn't stop it?
We're an independent group. So yeah, I guess presumably they can make your life more difficult.
Could you decide to move your courtroom out of 1201 Franklin?
I haven't thought about that, Justin, to be quite honest. I mean, I don't know like what legal restrictions there are for that.
Here's what I'm getting.
Because
can't the county commissioners mandate that this is the way the county is going to do indigent defense? And we're going to just set up an office that runs it?
Because some things are delegated as our role,
okay,
right? And figuring out how the plans roll and all of that. In Commissioner's Court, that's not their role, and they can't just take that.
Okay.
They are your funding source, right? So
right.
You got to kind of work in tandem. But like to your like example, well, you could, like a judge couldn't decide to just go out of the courthouse. There are so many things tied to that, right? Because we use the sheriffs, we need holdovers, we need this, and so you can only do your own thing to the extent that you have the stakeholders to support it, because we rely on our stakeholders. And so I think that's why our 16 have really tried to operate in lockstep, because when one gets out, it confuses, the lawyers, it confuses people that are accused, it confuses victims. It's too confusing when people try to totally go solo with their own process. We, of course, still all have our different processes, but we try to keep some uniformity there to make sure that, things run relatively smoothly.
Now, I know that you were a big, I don't want to say proponent of the MAC, but you were involved intimately with getting it set up, staffing it and all that.
Yeah.
So the next question might seem kind of silly, but do you have any issues with the MAC? Like just having it set up the way that it is, where you're not directly picking the attorney, or your court staff isn't picking the attorneys who's being assigned cases, it's taken out of your hands and it's somewhere else. Does that worked for your court or not?
Yeah, I mean, it's worked. Now, don't get me wrong, there are times where there's something that I don't like.
Like what?
Right? Like, there might be a lawyer, for example, that is like not showing up, and so I could ordinarily be like, okay, yeah, no, I'm not. Don't put them on the next rotation because, and I don't have control over that anymore, right?
Right.
And I have to rely on someone else to try to help curb that behavior with a lawyer, and so sometimes there's some frustration there. To me, that frustration is worth the independence
Right.
and having that separation. But yeah, if I controlled it all, it'd be a lot easier. I just do whatever I want.
I don't know if there'd be enough hours in the day for you
Yeah.
to control it all.
Right, but you could, right? Like you might miss some things, right?
Right.
Or you might
maybe not do it well, but
right,
you could do
and,
it.
and ultimately, I think that's why it was worth it for me to have the independence.
Right.
Because as diligent as I try to be, I'm not on that side of the bar anymore, and so you don't know what's happening. You don't know who has a cajillion cases. You don't know that somebody, has way too many cases because all you know is what's happening right in front of you, right in your court. And so it has helped to have that independence to make sure that things stay balanced. The lawyers have the resources that they should have that, the DA's office enjoys because of their institutional office. But, it's not without its headaches. And starting it and building it from the ground certainly was not without heartache and headache.
Sure.
But still worth it.
Yeah. Well, and so the example that you give of having an attorney that comes to your court like over too often so late that then you're like, if I had control, I'd take them off. I'm gonna make it clear to people watching, I don't think that any judge should do this, but with the MAC, don't you now have two things you can do to address that issue? You can talk directly to that lawyer, but you could also call up Mr. Harden, Ms. Ware, and say, if y'all are gonna continue to staff my court with this person, I need someone to talk to them.
Yeah.
I mean, but isn't that kind of a better thing than when it was before? It was just you. All you were the only one that could talk to that lawyer and say, if you're going to keep getting cases out of my court, you need to start getting here, Justin, before 11:45.
Right, but then, right. And so most, that works fine. But then some are like, meh.
Right.
And then if worse come to worse, then I'm like, forget it, I'm through
Okay.
with them. And they could just go on over to another court and be like chronically late and leaving their client sitting there for hours. This, if you continue to have that pattern of behavior, you're not only locked out of court 12, you're locked out of all 16.
Fair.
You're off, at least for a while, right? And so there is, some ability to keep behavior that should be corrected from just scurrying off to another courtroom. And
Like,
so it's more effective in that way.
Like whenever there's it kind of looks from some police officer's career path that they act bad in one spot, and so they just end up, in like Royal Forest Police Department or something.
Right.
Roman
We're trying
Forest.
that it helps to
Right.
try to create some systemic expectations and guidelines. Yeah, so I mean, I feel like it does, at least it works better for Court 12 to have it set up that way where someone else is kind of doing the oversight piece, the support piece that we can't even really do because of the adversarial nature. And so we have a lot of lawyers who run their own operation, right? And not all have all the, resources that you set up within your firm. And so it's nice when a solo attorney can have just kind of some basic resources to be able to provide good representation on a misdemeanor case.
Absolutely. And the resources you're talking about are like access to investigators, access to social workers who can help clients get to and from court so they don't end up back in jail, things like that.
Immigration attorneys,
Right.
those types of things that are, really standard, that should be standard in the representation. Now they have easier access to that. And so that part is working out super well.
You just said something that makes me want to jump into a different topic. So if we can come back to the MAC, we can. But immigration attorneys, immigration. I have not seen ICE at 1201 Franklin yet, but the talk is it's going to happen, right?
I would not be surprised if that occurred.
The judge that was arrested in Wisconsin. Now, I've started to hear some of the stories of what actually the role that she played or allegedly played, but when I heard that story, what I immediately thought of was you and your colleagues, and that they're watching this story and now they're worrying, like, what did she actually do? you know, and, but what did you think when you heard that story? You know what I'm talking about?
Yeah.
Okay. Well, sorry, dumb question. You just
Yeah, I
say
mean,
you don't
that
watch the
sent-
news anymore.
Yeah,
but
but that sent kind of shockwaves,
Sure.
I think.
It
you know,
did,
throughout
okay.
the judiciary or throughout the legal community. It was just
of
so
a country, right?
Yeah, so unprecedented. But I think it did make you think, like, okay, wait, what are we about to be dealing with? You know, I will say we've always had to think about different entities trying to use the courthouse as a place, as a dragnet, right? And so I don't really see this as any different.
Right.
And so I've dealt with this in certain ways, you know, in other situations. And the way I explain it to people, even agents that come in are like, yeah, no, I just want to talk to that person right there. And I'm like, yeah, no, not in this holdover back here though, because I brought them here. They're here by force.
By your order.
By my order. And so for you to just now go back into the holdover and interview them about whatever random thing kind of makes it seem like we're working together. And I'm saying that they have to comply, which
I
we
brought
both
you here
know,
so you can talk to this.
which we both
investigator.
know is not the case.
Right.
And so there is a whole other jail right down the street that you can certainly go and interview people. But for the people that I have brought here for their Court 12 case, which is unconnected to what you're talking about, I think we're sending the wrong message if I allow you to do that. And when you say it like that, agents have been like, oh, okay, yeah. So I can just go like over to them. I'm like, I don't run the jail.
You're right.
But that holdover back there,
I do run.
this is not seeming appropriate. And so I think they've understood the need for that type of separation because we want people accused to come to court, so we don't want them ducking and dodging because they think it's a dragnet. We want complaining witnesses, victims, to be able
Right.
to come to court and not feel like, and I think that's the other thing that people don't think about.
Oh,
Not
yeah.
only are the accused thinking about it, but we're going to see, I think very quickly, that complaining witnesses are not going to feel comfortable coming forward or coming to court. And so I want to make sure that people understand the court is here for these cases. Now, of course, there are other ancillary things that come up, right? Somebody has a warrant. So I'm
Sure.
like, you got to come on in because you're out on my bond and you had this
Right.
warrant. So we need to see you. But other things, I think that we really have to take a hard look at, you know, the law, our obligations, our judicial canons, and be smart about the way in which we run our courtroom.
Well, and I appreciate what you're saying about not seeing this dragnet, to use that terminology, much different than the other ones. Some of the stories, and I haven't seen any of it, so I'll actually wait to see if this is true from my own eyes if I have to, but some of the stories are that, I don't know if you talk to an ICE agent who feels like they're there to execute Donald Trump's executive order and that warrant, that you're going to be able to get through to that person. That I don't think you should use this forum and this time.
Fair. That is
So
fair.
What, I guess, do you sit there at that point when they're like, I understand you, I'm not doing that, and they go in your holdover and do whatever they're going to do, or in your open courtroom? Like,
Yeah, I don't
you
think.
sat there and thought, like, what am I going to do?
Yeah, I don't think that I don't think we know exactly how that will go, right? Like, this is an open courtroom, so I certainly couldn't stop an agent from coming in. There are some things, you know, required, right, to be able to take someone with you, but I don't know that there is a whole lot that we can do if somebody comes in with an arrest warrant, right, to take someone.
Would you ask to see the warrant? Is that something you feel like you can do?
I think under the circumstances that we're talking about now, where we're dealing with this whole new world of, you know, federal agents, yeah, I think it would be appropriate to say, okay, under what warrant, where's your warrant? You know, to really kind of figure out what's happening. Because I would want to know, like, is this something that I should be expecting at every docket?
Right.
You know, it's disruptive. And
It's
so
gonna be incredibly
we really have to be mindful about that. I'm hoping it doesn't come to that. But we are kind of actively thinking about how it is that we are able to conduct court reasonably and safely without making it into like a huge circus.
Are they all judges having conversations about this?
Yeah, I think you can bet that every judge,
Yeah?
not just Harris County, everywhere,
With each other?
with each other, with
Okay.
you know, Office of Court Administration, with law enforcement agencies, stakeholders, like what is happening, what should we be expecting, and really figuring out where my lane ends and another one begins.
Mm-hmm. Okay. Speaking of different lanes, we were talking earlier about docket call. Do y'all do anything, judges, and I think I've asked you this before, to kind of compare notes and policies and procedures? Do you know how the court next to you or the court across the hall is conducting their business?
Not necessarily. You know, I certainly have colleagues that I'm closer to than others, right? So then I'm like, okay, like I didn't invent the scheduling order.
Right,
I got that from like Judge Finch, who had put a lot of work into it,
I
right?
know.
And so I just could make my own adjustments to what she'd already done. But it was her, you know, seeing, oh wait, I see her numbers getting chopped down. Let me reevaluate my process.
I want to be like that.
Or even just like I watch, you know, my jail numbers. I watch all kind of different numbers and weigh it against the whole. Because if there's something super out of whack, I want to like figure out why am I so far off from everyone else, to see if there's anything there that I need to be concerned about. Maybe there is, maybe there isn't. And so yeah, but then there are sometimes I hear like somebody else, they're like, oh yeah, that judge does all paper, and I'm like, paper what? Paper like documents, like
everything,
like made
paper.
of trees.
Yep.
And so I'm like, and I will know that, right? Because everybody can kind of do what works best for them and what they want to do. But I literally never really get to see how things roll in other people's court.
That's what's been so interesting to me as I've gotten a little bit older and doing this, is how clearly y'all don't know what each one is doing. And anybody, the staff, sometimes the bailiffs, because the bailiffs will float and the clerks will float a little bit more.
And sometimes I'll ask the clerk. So like some of the stuff I've learned, you know, I went to sign something, and you know, it used to be they just put everything in my queue. And then somebody was like, well, Judge Walker can put stuff in his own queue. I'm like, how? Right? And so then they told me how to put stuff in my own queue.
Look out,
so
Judge Draper's got hands of her own queue
you know,
now.
They still do it for me in a lot of circumstances, but I can also do it for myself.
Right.
And so you just realize, oh, I didn't even like know that was a thing. So I definitely take some things from other judges, you know, that are close in proximity or that I'm just relationally closer with. But there are some where I just never see you, so I have no idea what you're doing.
Y'all don't, I mean, Judge Walker is right across the hall from you. I mean, I don't know. I have to take a tape measure. The building's a square, so Judge Jackson and Judge Walker might be like equidistant from you. But he's right across the hall. Y'all don't think that like maybe like you're gonna laugh at this, but like a summer retreat where y'all could like sit around and just the 16 of you and maybe take your coordinators too and like talk about how y'all.
Contrary to what you might think, we do that.
You do?
We do.
And where y'all go?
That is how we find out. Sometimes it's here, sometimes we are off-site. I can't disclose.
Okay.
Top secret location.
Yes, ma'am.
But no, you know, and so we do that, and we have retreats, and we do discuss, because I think that's how some of the scheduling orders picked up. You know, we had a retreat, and we could see everybody's numbers up on the board, and it's like, ooh, what's he doing over there?
Does Judge Wright wear a bathing suit? Sorry, you don't have to answer that. You don't have to answer that.
Yeah.
Okay, so y'all have, I know y'all have like you said, like your 2 o'clock meetings and stuff, but I don't, Judge Walker raised his hand, like, did y'all know you can put stuff in your own queue?
Judge Walker is probably one of the first ones to say, hey, did y'all know we could do this? Or did y'all know that we should try? I mean, so you always look to Judge Walker for a suggestion. He's just that guy. But yeah, and sometimes we hear about something somebody else is doing, we're like, yeah, I don't want to do that.
Right, well, sure. Yeah.
So that accounts for some of the differences. But yeah, hopefully we are like reevaluating our processes and tweaking it and trying to, you know, sometimes, you know, especially those that I'm close with, we'll give each other a hard time. I can remember, you know, not to being like, oh yeah, I met with the probation people. You got everybody on conditions, right? I'm like, what?
Right. That's good. I'd like to see y'all ribbing each other.
But you know, just to but it put me on notice, like, oh, I didn't even recognize that when I say this, that cues to pretrial services that I mean for them to like supervise the person.
Right.
And so I didn't know in that case that my numbers were so far out of whack from everyone else. And then that made me realize, oh, when I say that to you, I don't mean I want, you know, this level of supervision.
Right.
If I say this, that basically means they already have the level of supervision I think is appropriate. Or if I add on, that means at that time I need you to kind of go in and put some things in place. But for her kind of like teasing me a little bit, I don't even know that I would have noticed, or at least not noticed
Looked
as soon as
into
I
it.
did.
Right. Yeah, they were starting to call you ankle monitor Draper.
Exactly, like what?
Just kidding. Just kidding. I never heard anybody say that. So what, we were also talking a little before the show, I guess we talked a lot before the show, about who they are, right? Like you mentioned earlier, like you're looking at your numbers, and your numbers are 2,100, your jail numbers and your bond numbers, and like, what does that do? Why do you look at your numbers?
I look at my numbers, one, because it affects what our day is like.
Okay.
Right.
How many cases do I have today to deal with?
Right, and it affects also how quickly could I get a case to trial. You know, how quickly can things roll? If I have 2,100, we're significantly underwater.
Right.
Right, and right now we're hovering a little bit over 1,100. So now I'm kind of like right above the water. Right.
So what's the good number then?
You know,
These numbers are total cases in your court.
Right. So it's hard to say because we've been in underwater world for so long that now seems like normal. But I think back in the day when things were like regular and we
Like
weren't
before
as
Harvey?
large. Yeah, before Harvey, I mean, I'm talking, 15 years ago. I think numbers were like well below 1,000, like
Really?
more like the 600 range, right?
Is that because of, well, some people would say it's because crime rates are higher, but not me. But is that because more activity in the intake office of the DA's office?
I think a combination. I think we're a much larger county.
Okay.
And we have just continued to grow and not grow the number of courts. And so your courts are going to swell. Then you get backed up by something like Harvey, and you're like, whew, it's going to take us a long time to recover. And then here comes the pandemic.
The double hit of
And so
COVID.
it's like, okay, you know what? So we'll just learn to swim underwater.
Right.
And so, it's really been hard to figure out the best way forward. We are starting to see some light at the end of the tunnel, though, and I think these processes for sure have helped us get there. But yeah, it's my hope that one day we do operate on a level that allows you really to spend the time that you need to on everything.
When you talk about the courts, the district courts have opened, or the state has opened, what, 7 new district courts? 8 district courts in the last 2 years?
Something along those lines.
When I started, it stopped at the 351st.
Oh yeah.
And now we've got, what, 482nd?
I don't even know the 400 numbers.
486, 47th, 488, yeah, there's a lot.
Yeah.
And it's like they just opened 3 at the end of last year and then 3 at the beginning of this year. And we keep going, what about the county courts? Because there's 2 times or 3 times as many cases, misdemeanor cases filed than felonies. And now we've always had more felony courts than misdemeanors, and now we have like almost twice as many.
Yeah.
We're almost at 30. Where are we at? 28? Somebody.
Yeah. It's.
People were messaging us.
It's definitely, we definitely need more county criminal courts. I mean, there's just no way around that.
Where does that come from? Sorry.
It ultimately comes from the legislature, but
Really?
you ask first at commissioner's court level and get the buy-in there so that you can send over, I don't know if it's like a resolution or whatever, you send over a resolution saying our commissioner's court will support this addition of courts. And then it goes through the legislature and they vote it up or down in these sessions. So presumably there'll be some bill that has like all the ones that get added and they can yay or nay it.
I knew the district courts were formed by the legislature. I didn't realize the county courts were too.
Same process.
Is there some politics going on for why they've created all these new district courts and no county courts?
Well, politics to the extent that, one, it costs money. And so, we are certainly asking. And I think the next time we make the ask, we will, want people to come and weigh in on just how underwater the county criminal courts are, because we really needed it this year. We made the ask and we really needed it and didn't get it. And
so the legislature is going to close without new courts?
Without new courts for county criminal court in Harris County.
You got to wait 2 more years to beg again.
Right. Now, the other issue is...
And they get to spend those 2 years beating y'all up over...
Backlog.
Yeah.
Yes. It's like a hamster wheel.
So, it's not politics at all.
I will say we're also, we are in a space issue. So
right.
There's that.
Like, where's the next courtroom going to go?
Where do the next ones go? So, I mean, I think we're due some long-term planning for the county and how it serves the growth that we've seen and the growth that we can expect to see. We've kind of been behind the 8 ball for a long time, and so it's my hope that we will be a little bit more forward-thinking about planning of, the justice complex and the stakeholders all weigh in to build something that really works well.
That Family Law Center is going to be coming down. That's some premium. They took the DA building down that was right next to it. I thought that was coming down next, but
We're still actively using it.
you need it. Yeah.
Exactly.
So, emergency relief docket number 2, where the DAs are sending a lot of domestic violence cases. I have my own issues with that I'll save for another time, but is it really providing you relief?
Yes.
Like, okay.
The short answer is yes, because
It's just something that takes some cases out of your docket.
not just some cases, but it takes cases out of our docket that really eat up a lot of time, right? So instead of me sitting there waiting for the DVD prosecutor to come from whatever floor to talk about bond for this one case, that's all housed in one place where they can all sit over there and talk about all of the issues, whether it's bond, trial, discovery. They can deal with that in one place and move it along a little bit more swiftly than us trying to sprinkle that in amongst my docket of 95 people.
Gotcha.
And so it's been helpful in that way. And I get regular updates from Judge Singer about, okay, whatever Court 12 cases, these are set for this Friday. I'll let you know, if we end up picking a jury, but I want to give you a heads up because he would pick the jury and then I would take the case on Monday. So he wants to make sure that I'm aware that, hey, you got this this trial starting on Monday. And so that has helped. I mean, when you're running underwater like we are, any relief of pressure is going to help.
Okay. I'm just thinking back to what you said about the MAC. Like, some loss of control and having to suck it up with certain lawyers working in your court is worth it for that. And I just worry that, especially those types of cases, because when you talked about misdemeanors that have longest term impact for somebody, it's a domestic violence case.
Fair.
Like, only a domestic, I mean, you can get a conviction for a DWI second, and after a few years, maybe 7 years, depending on the insurance company, you're gonna eventually not have to feel from that. You're gonna always have the risk of a felony hanging over your head. You're gonna have those convictions, and that's horrible. But 7-10 years after domestic violence conviction, you still can't get apartments. You still are having trouble getting certain jobs. You can't have a firearm ever. So I feel like, I hear you, it gives you some relief.
But also the ultimate consequence in that court still lies with me. You want to have a trial? Let's do it. You come right back to me.
We were just talking right before this
And
about how
you
you don't always
already-
know what's going on in
Well,
every
fair,
courtroom.
but you all know where I am. And you all know if your case doesn't resolve there, your trial is in front of me.
Yes, ma'am, and I'm
And
very
it
happy
comes
about that.
right back and we have the trial. And that's for all of them. All of the ERD2 cases
Sure.
go back to the home court and you have your trial.
Because the commissioners defunded ERD1, where John Clinton was taking, mostly John Clinton, sometimes Sherman Ross, Judge Clinton were taking the cases after Judge Singer picked the jury. They were conducting those. And
I almost forgot about that because I didn't participate
Yes, right,
with
you didn't use
ERD1,
that.
so I'm not for sure. But yes, I think when ERD1 existed, when that emergency relief docket existed, those judges could try the case. That doesn't exist anymore. So all of these family violence cases are ultimately tried by the elected judge. And so it is a trade-off, but I don't think that we're trading off kind of the most critical part of a case. And for me, and this varies from court to court, the most critical part of my job, even though a lot of it feels super like heavy and important, is a trial.
Okay, all right. I agree with you on that. But 99%, 93%, 90% of cases don't go to trial. So for those 90% of cases, the most important thing that we were just defining never happens. So, like, what's happening to those people and to those cases pre-trial when they're not on the very well-trusted, well-respected Judge Draper's watch?
I can,
You see the concerns?
I can talk to you about Court 12,
Yes, ma'am.
and you know that you can always come back to Court 12. And there's no love lost. We just have the trial.
Well, but before the trial, there's so much that happens in pre-trial. You saw that as a defense attorney, like
That's
bond
true.
conditions, especially domestic violence cases. Bond conditions mean dad can't come home, or mom can't come home, or mom or dad can't have any contact with each other, or even talk about their kids. I mean, I've had clients who had to go to the hospital and they got charged with violating a protective order because their kid was in the hospital and then their spouse was up there and they had a protective order. These are serious cases, and I don't know if y'all all know how some of those things are being handled.
But on the flip side, in misdemeanor court, DWI and assault family violence, that's the most serious pretty much of what we deal with.
Sure.
And so it is very difficult to give super individualized attention when you're as underwater as we are in our individual courts. And so, setting aside how you might feel about the current operation, the thought was these cases need to be in a place where they can receive individualized attention. All the stakeholders in this process, DVD prosecutors, the defense attorneys, everybody just needs to be together and figure this out, because things can slip through the cracks with as busy as we are and as crazy and hectic as these dockets get. And we don't want that to happen in these particular cases. Criminal trespasses, we're going to trust that we can keep up with it, right?
Right.
But we thought it best for that case type to be able to receive that individualized attention that we just were struggling to give, as busy and as hectic as our courts can get. We do our best, and you all know that. But we are operating with the bare minimum of resources, and it's really difficult. I mean, we're having clearance rate. We all pretty much have clearance rates well over 100 every month. That is not sustainable. We're running to try to get higher. The higher up that clearance rate you go, the more you're going to see in diminishing returns on the other end in the outcomes of cases. And so we're trying to figure out processes that in the meantime give us some relief. Hopefully when we have all the courts that we need, you don't need
So additional
that.
courts, additional county courts could help, I'm hearing, and then staffing the domestic violence bureau more properly by the DA's office. Because you don't have to wait on, so you don't have 4 prosecutors split up between 16 courts, right?
Yeah, and I think, they've just gotten a nice windfall of money. So I think that they are going to,
And
I think they're going to invest in that area. And I think they have been, but it needs more investment. That's a really large part of misdemeanor dockets. And so, we need resources all the way around.
Right. Well, and Sean Tier sat at this table, it was in the old studio, and he said that his plan was to have 16 domestic violence prosecutors, 1 assigned to each court, so that judges didn't have to wait, defense attorneys didn't have to wait around for it. And frankly, taxpayers need to understand, through assigned cases and the MAC, when we're sitting there, a defense attorney is sitting there waiting for a prosecutor to get over there so we can talk about the case that the prosecutors who are in the courtroom refuse to talk to us about, we're billing all of you for that time we're just sitting there waiting. So it's resources are limited, and then they end up going to a place that they really don't need to go.
Which is what?
Pay me to sit there and wait for the DV prosecutor to get there.
Yeah.
So I'm obviously have my feelings about this, but I just.
And I appreciate the feedback. I always do. I get it from you, from other attorneys, because again, that's a court that we can't see, and so just kind of making sure that we have processes in place to make sure that it's operating the way we need it to and intend it to, is helpful.
Do you get judicial interns like some of the other courts do?
Yes.
What do they do? What does a judicial intern do?
So I think it varies from court to court, but in my court, they do a lot of observation because, it depends on I've had them all the way from high school to law school that have done it in Court 12. So there's a lot of observation. Sometimes I do, particularly if they're law students, I might have them take a look at kind of a a PC-like statement to
Okay.
kind of see if they can identify what they should be looking for based on the elements of a case, to try to get their mind exercising in that way to see if they can say yay or nay that they find probable cause in a
Oh, so you're
particular
putting
case.
them in your spot.
Yeah.
You're just like, what would you do if you were
Yeah,
the judge?
is there probable cause, in this PC statement to kind of see where they are. I have required readings for every intern that's in my court, 2 books. All of
Okay.
them get the book gifted from me.
What are the books?
One is Just Mercy,
Okay.
one of my favorites. Another is, I think, a little less known, but easily in my top 5, is A Knock at Midnight by attorney Brittany Barnett out of Dallas.
Okay, I've seen the cover of that.
If you haven't read it, it's absolutely phenomenal.
Okay.
And so I have them read both of those, and we kind of like talk about those throughout the semester, because essentially I want them to walk away from a semester or summer with me really feeling like they can change whatever it is that they want to. Because I think all of us want to like join some movement. It's like, nah, you the movement. And
Right,
so
right,
I
right.
want them to read these books to see people who really have turned the tide essentially by themselves, right? I mean, of course they have people that have helped them along the way, but that they're kind of like one-man bands, that the system is different because they were there. So I have them to read those books, most really enjoy that, and visit with a lot of attorneys so that they can kind of make other relationships. So that's kind of the bulk of what we do, and it can kind of vary as things come up in court. Maybe some legal research, but it just kind of depends on where they are. It depends on where they are.
Brief you on issues and stuff.
Yeah, I mean, a lot of times what comes up in court, I mean, I can find it
It's trial court,
myself
right.
in about 90 seconds, or I could give it to you and wait 3 days. So that's a little bit of a challenge. But I do think that most have had a meaningful experience, and I have a pretty close relationship with all the ones that have come through Court 12.
Okay, good. I've just started recently seeing the judicial interns. I guess they're back in school now, right?
Yeah, I
You're gonna
usually
get a
have them in the
one?
summer for sure.
Okay.
And then sometimes I do, because we're in the city with 3 law schools, sometimes I do have them during the semester. I don't have one right now.
Okay, it's a neat program. I'm glad that y'all are participating in that, because I didn't do that with a judge. I did it with defense attorneys, and it put me on the trajectory of where I'm going to be.
Yeah.
So we got to, whoa, it doesn't vibrate. Oh, look, it
We
says
learned.
vibrate.
We
It says
learned.
vibrate. Just,
I was about to say, I'm going to have to try that
that's
one.
something that they should do, right? Like tell your phone to vibrate the alarm, not, yeah, we've tried that before the show. Anyway, well, I guess we have to run it out, but thank you so much for coming on.
Thanks for having me. It's been a while, but I'm glad to be back with you.
Can we
of
keep
course.
doing this and have you on some more?
We absolutely can.
I always like talking to you, Judge.
Same.
Thank you all for showing up, or for tuning in. Thank you to Judge Draper for being here tonight. Thank you so much. On behalf of HCCLA and Houston Media Source, thanks for tuning in. We will see y'all next time. HCCLA Banquets next week. Hottest ticket in town.
Can't wait.
Should be fun.